demonstrated hostility to Roe v. Wade. Kavanaugh also meets today with top Senate Democrat Chuck Schumer. The minority leader is expected to press Kavanaugh about releasing all documents from his time in the George W. Bush administration. On Capitol Hill, Jared Halpern, Fox News.
A border enforcement advocacy group says the arrest of a terrorist in California completely debunks the argument that refugees are thoroughly vetted. Chad Groening has more.
Recently, the FBI's Joint Terrorism Task Force arrested 45-year-old Iraqi national Omar Amin for the murder of an Iraqi police officer in June of 2014. Amin is a suspected Islamic State member who had actually fled to the United States after the killing and eventually applied for a green card. Fortunately, it was not approved. Now he faces extradition back to Iraq.
Bill Gertz is a senior editor.
Spokesman for the Federation for American Immigration Reform.
These are the sorts of issues that you deal with, especially when you have people coming from countries where the whole civil infrastructure has broken down, where it's very, very difficult to do any kind of meaningful background checks. And especially given the volume of people that we're trying to process, these sort of mistakes are inevitable, and the consequences can be very serious.
Millman says with the Trump administration facing an October 1st deadline to determine how many refugees will be allowed to enter the U.S., hopefully it will be evident that until our vetting system is vastly improved, the number of refugees allowed in the country should by no means be increased. I'm Chad Groening.
It's not fake news. Hunting is good for the economy. Chris Woodward explains.
Hunting Works for America is a program of the National Shooting Sports Foundation that is busily creating chapters in states across the country. There are 18 state chapters so far, including Ohio, which joined the list on Monday. Foundation spokesman Bill Broussard says one of the goals of Hunting Works is to make the public, hunters, business owners, elected officials, and news outlets aware that hunting is really important to state economies.
Hunters know it pretty well. If they go on a hunting trip, they're buying licenses, they're frequenting sporting goods stores and buying equipment, including ammunition. If they're traveling a ways, they're staying in hotels, they're stopping at gas stations, they're eating at restaurants. So in many, many ways, they're injecting a lot of money into the economy.
How much money are we talking exactly? According to the National Shooting Sports Foundation, hunters spend $850 million a year in Ohio, about $320 million on trip-related expenses, and $274 million on equipment. That's a lot of buckeyes.
We've been all across the country, really, from Oregon and Washington in the west to down south and in the east, and with more states to come.
I'm Chris Woodward.
And finally, it's bad news for drivers. We're going to keep paying more for gas. Oil prices continue to rise. After closing yesterday at $66.43 a barrel, benchmark U.S. crude oil is now above $67 a barrel. American Family News is online at onenewsnow.com and on the One News Now mobile app. I'm Rusty Pugh.
My name's Tim, I'm 17. All the male role models in my life did drugs, so it's no wonder I ended up just like them. I was down to 90 pounds when I came to Teen Challenge, but now I'm healthy and drug-free.
If you know an adult or teenager who's struggling with a chemical addiction, Teen Challenge can help. Call us today at 417-581-2181 or reach us online at teenchallengeusa.com. This is Urban Family Talk.
Uh-oh, no sound.
She's sharp, pointed, and insightful. This is Stacy on the Right on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk. Now, Stacy Washington.
Hey everybody, welcome to the program today. It's Stacy Washington, host of Stacy on the Right. I'm also the co-chair of National Center's Advisory Council Project 21, nationalcenter.org for more on that. And then I want to welcome you into the show. Yes, we have American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk, our syndicators, and we're so glad to be with you today. Really busy morning for me. We had Watchmen on the Wall here in St. Louis today. It's a pastor's briefing, but any community member or influencer or anyone who speaks to groups and individuals can attend. So I registered about a little over a week ago at the suggestion of a fellow from the Family Research Council. And I was truly blessed. I got to hear both Bishop Harry Jackson and Bishop Larry Jackson speak to the group today, as well as others from Family Research Center. And it was a great event. And it's still going on. I'm going to miss a couple of the keynotes, but that's okay because I'd rather be here with you. So welcome to the program. Today on the show, we're actually going to have, we're going to move through a lot of different topics like we always do. So it turns out our totally racist President Trump, has actually deported a Nazi. And you might be thinking, oh, I thought they were all dead. Well, most of them are. And there was one left that we know about here in the United States, at least so far. I don't know that there are tons, just maybe this one. And he's been under a deportation order since 2004. So the president deported him. So we're going to talk about that. I'm going to tell you how you're equipped to do the work that God has called you to do, and why it's so important that you know that you're equipped and that you act as if you are equipped, operating within what God has called you to do. We're also going to have an interview with Brigitte Gabriel. She's the president of actforamerica.org. She's the author of Rise, The Defense of Judeo-Christian Values. And then in hour two, we're going to be talking about American citizens, people and names you know, like John Boehner. I mean, famous folk who used to work in government and in defense and in tech and in other industries that are super important to our national defense, how they've been co-opted by China to be advocates for China in Washington, D.C. Now, you might say, well, there are plenty of detractors for China, so what's the big whoop? Well, it's a big whoop because these people are making it easier for China to infiltrate our most important industries, steal intellectual property from us, and soften our posture towards their country. Meanwhile, everywhere you look, all over media, every talking head you can think of is talking about Russia. Russia's a threat, absolutely, but so is China. Why do we pay no attention to what China is doing and everything to Russia? So I saw a report out today, tweeted by Cam Edwards, good friend. He actually is, again, back to Facebook. Facebook's going to have a rating system by which they rate your trustworthiness. And then if you're not trustworthy to them, you know, they'll put your score out for everybody to see. You know where they started this drama? Under demands by Chinese communist officials. And the Chinese actually use the scoring system for their actual citizens. So if you have a low trust score in China, you can't buy a plane ticket out of the country. You can't get a different job. You have to stay where you are. You can't move jobs. That's the kind of stuff, the kind of totalitarian nonsense that Zuckerberg is bringing here to the United States through Facebook. Oh, we're going to talk about that. So right now, let's dig into, I'm going to go to my discussion about us being equipped. But first, I want to hear, this is some audio of the president talking about Democrats and their attacks on law enforcement. And this, I actually found this on C-SPAN, listening to C-SPAN this morning, and they had a bit of it over at, I believe it was Free Beacon. And this is important because the news media only talks about Donald Trump's tweets. They never talk about the other things he says that are so smart and on point and intelligent, and really that go to the heart of why he was elected. So it's number one.
Last month, the mayor of Portland, Oregon, shamefully ordered local police to stand down, leaving federal law enforcement officers to face an angry mob of violent people. Leading members of the Democrat Party have even launched a campaign to abolish ICE. In other words, they want to abolish America's borders. And when you think about it, I'm working on it all the time. They come in. We're protecting borders of other countries, but we don't protect our own borders. How about that? Spending billions and billions of dollars in other countries, in some cases places we shouldn't be, to protect them. We don't protect our own border. We condemn these shameful attacks on our great law enforcement. Any politician who puts criminal aliens before American citizens should find a new line of work, because it's not going to work.
So he's right about that. But he had a little bit more to say. And what is so hateful about the media coverage of the president and how it does such a disservice to us as Americans is that when he's talking about things like this, they'd rather he not talk about it because it goes against their narrative that this whole idea that we need to protect our borders is some kind of xenophobic, racist-driven thing, when in reality, there's a lot more to it than just, well, I'm an American and I'm scared of people who aren't Americans. Like, I don't know any Americans who are afraid of other people just because they're not Americans. No one's afraid of anybody. So this is not about fear. It's not about a phobia. It's about the truth, which is we have a lot of crime going on, which, by the way, guess who's coming on the show tomorrow? Ann Coulter. That's right. Ann Coulter's coming on the show tomorrow. She has a new book out, and I'm going to be reading the rest of it tonight. I've been digging in, and I'm so excited. Yes, look at the crazy in my eyes, you guys. I'm so excited. All right, so let's finish up with President Trump saying a blue wave in the midterms means crime and open borders.
And any politicians that get up and say that our country was never great, you heard that. I think that's the end of that career. Congressional Democrats have opposed Kate's Law, opposed legislation to crack down on MS-13 thugs, and supported deadly sanctuary cities, which are a disaster and which are becoming, on a weekly basis, more and more unpopular with the public. A lot has happened in the last 2 years. Last month, House Democrats even boycotted a resolution supporting our brave ICE officers and agents. But I will say this, the Republicans were with you all the way, all the way. And we won. We won. This new wave of anti-borders, anti-law enforcement extremism, and shameful, dangerous, it's horrible in every way, and it's going to stop. It's going to stop right now. It's going to stop today. We slowed it down. Now we're stopping it. We will never surrender our nation to the forces of anarchy and chaos and crime. We will not allow our communities to be consumed by deadly poisons and violent predators. The poisons are flowing across our border, and we're hitting it from every angle. But we need new laws. We need border laws. We need immigration laws. We need them fast. We're going to get them. Hopefully the midterms will help toward that end. I think we're going to do very well in the midterms, and this is one of the very big reasons. The fact is people respect law and order, and they love our law enforcement. And I think we're going to have much more of a red wave than what you're going to see as a phony blue wave. Blue wave means crime. It means open borders. Not good.
So you might be wondering, well, okay, I get it, listening to what he's talking about there. And I can see why the mainstream media doesn't want to put that on, because that gives people the idea that the midterms are still in play. We've been told that we must expect a blue wave and that there's no way anything else is going to happen. Kind of similar to what happened in 2016 when we were told that it was a 97% chance that Hillary Clinton would be the president and Donald Trump had no chance, no reason for even getting up the morning of the election, no reason to have the rallies, no reason to, continue to run a campaign, no reason to raise any money or do any kind of get out the vote efforts. He was losing, point blank, period, done, the end. While they're giving Omarosa Manigault Newman $24 million in free publicity for her book, which is an unsourced tome of lies, they're ignoring the fact that this, not only is the election not over, it hasn't even yet begun. No one has cast their votes for the midterm election yet. Not one person has done that yet. Now, absentee voting will begin in some states, shortly after all the primaries are done. But as far as the determination of who's going to win or lose in the election, it's not happened yet. And so instead of focusing on that, I want to give you a little bit. It was just a taste of what we were able to do at the Marriage and Family Conference at Tupelo over the weekend. And the reason I'm sharing this with you is because it's appropriate for us to try to figure amongst ourselves, if you're deciding who you're going to vote for, individual candidates, you need to be doing that from the biblical worldview. And that's really all that matters. It's not about the tan factor that you have, be it no tan, somewhat tanned, permanently tanned, extraordinarily tanned, and delicious. All of the different formations and formulations of what we look like on the outside have zero to do with whether or not we believe that the Bible is the Word of God, that God has given us each a specific purpose, which we are to carry out while we're here on this earth, and that when we go to the judgment seat, we're going to be judged on these actions, whether or not we carried out what we were told to do. A lot of people who are sitting around asking, they're inquiring of others, what do you think about this? Should I do this? Should I do that? Before you ask, should you do something else? Did you do the last thing God told you to do? Just cycle back in your mind the last time you prayed for something and you felt like the Lord told you to do X. Did you do that? Do that first. Then ask, what else should I do this? Should I do that? First, do what God already told you to do. And he's told us to do a number of different things. Primarily for this conversation, rendering unto Caesar that which is Caesar's. Now, why is that so important? Because when we don't vote as Christians, when we don't speak out about the truth, when we allow lies to become the norm and just let them flow out amongst us, we're not operating in all that God has for us. And then we are wondering, why does the culture look the way it does? Why am I seeing what I'm seeing on television? Why are so many kids leaving the church? Why are so many adults in the church living these unvictorious lives? Well, it's because we're not following what God has asked us to do. And we have free will. We're free to not do what he's called us to do. But when we do that, we can't be surprised that we're living, it's kind of lackluster. It's not going the way we want it to go. So let's first just understand what God has said to us. He's told us over and over again that we are forgiven, redeemed, and made right with him through what was done on the cross by Jesus. So there's no condemnation in Christ Jesus. So whatever we were, we are that no longer. We are new creations in Christ, and we can move forward without, well, I used to be this. Well, yeah, you used to be, but that's behind you. It's been separated from you as far as the east is from the west. Now what can you do? Now that you don't have condemnation on your back, now that that voice you hear in your ear telling you you're nothing, you can't do this, you can't do that, now that you know that that's not coming from you, that's not from God, that's the enemy trying to keep you from what God has for you, now you can let that go. Now you can say, well, what am I supposed to do? And for some of you that are listening in this audience, it's really about becoming active where you are. It's not about 100,000 followers on Twitter or a big 1 million+ page on Facebook. That's great. But with the algorithms and all that stuff, you're not reaching those people. I'm not reaching all the followers that I have online. They won't let me. So I have to keep doing what God has called me to do, which is all you have to do. So maybe what it looks like for you is that lady who's been asking you for the help on that committee at school, or that friend who's been saying, I want to get together and pray for our nation once a week. Or maybe it's you who's supposed to get the friends together and y'all have lunch and you pray over the nation once a week. You fast once a week, you pray once a week, whatever. That's what you need to be doing. So do what God has called you to do, because you are equipped to do that work. We'll be back in a minute.
Len Ingram of Redeem Clean felt God call him to support the American Family Association.
I'm a laundryman. I'm the son of a laundryman too. I love clean clothes. I love the business. I love everything about it. This project was built exclusively to support AFA and AFR. There's no strings attached. Another thing that I would like to see come out of this is that I would like to see other business people feel a calling to support ministries wherever and whatever they do to share the gospel of Jesus Christ.
In addition to your regular AFA giving, Redeem Clean Laundry Detergent allows you to increase your support of AFA just by continuing to wash your family's clothes. For clean laundry and support of a cleaner society, it's Redeem Clean. Learn more, find options, and get Redeem Clean products at afastore.net. That's afastore.net.
Hi, I'm Crawford Loritz with a legacy moment. Here's a principle you can take to the bank. Doing what is right and being faithful at it does not mean we'll never suffer. Some years ago, I went through a season of testing. It was a pretty tough stretch there. This came on the heels of a time of great fruitfulness in my personal life and in our ministry. Then suddenly I was in the midst of a hard time, a stretch of difficulty. It turned out to be a good reminder that testing and suffering are a normal part of the journey. Let me tell you about a situation in 2 Chronicles chapter 31, beginning in verse 20. Hezekiah was a tremendous king. God used him there in Judah to usher in reform and revival. Great things happened. Listen to these words. And thus Hezekiah did throughout all Judah, and he did what was right and what was good and true before the Lord his God. In every work in which he began in the service of the house of God, in law and in commandments, seeking his God, he did with all his heart and prospered. But listen to the opening verse in chapter 32. After these acts of faithfulness, Sennacherib, king of Assyria, came and invaded Judah, and besieged the fortified cities, and thought to break into them for himself. On the heels of faithful service, here comes incredible adversity. Hezekiah was a godly man. There was nothing he did to deserve this suffering and pain, but it was all of God. In spite of Hezekiah's faithfulness and consistency, Judah was still tested, and they suffered. Here's what I want you to remember today. Testing and suffering are not enemies. They may be our allies in producing in us the sweetness of the character of Christ, to keep us and to deepen us in our dependence upon him.
Legacy Moment is a production of Moody Radio, a ministry of Moody Global Ministries.
You can download episodes of Stacy on the Right from the podcast page on AFR.net or UrbanFamilyTalk.com. Now, back to the show on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
Well, welcome back to the show. I want to first say thanks so much for being here today. It's been fantastic. I'm still dining out on the conference and everyone that I got a chance to meet and the wonderful time we had meeting people and listening to the wonderful speakers. And I'm just looking forward to next year's conference. It's going to be bigger and better and even more impactful, I think, for people who choose to attend. And if you missed out, you can find out more at urbanfamilytalk.com. So right now it's my pleasure to welcome our first guest in the program today. And I just, some people are just amazing and they do awesome things and you wonder how they get all of it done. And our next guest is one of those women, Brigitte Gabriel, president of actforamerica.org. She's the author of a new book, Rise, The Defense of Judeo-Christian Values. Thank you so much for coming on today, Brigitte.
Oh, thank you, Stacy. I'm delighted to be with you.
We've talked before, and I always leave our conversations feeling like, whoa, that was like, whoa. And so this is no different because I'm looking at the link on Amazon. I'm like, okay, wow. So first, why'd you write this book and let's talk about it. Let's talk about like how you came to the place where you're like, I'm going to write this.
Well, watching what's happening in the country, America as we know it is being transformed before our very eyes. The flag that once flew on every street corner is now considered a hate symbol on college campuses. Athletes who used to break out in tears of pride during the national anthem are now kneeling in protest. Patriotism is seen as hateful. Freedom of speech is being eliminated by the tyranny of tolerance, and police are being targeted by criminals while the mainstream media victimizes the killers. I can go on, but what we are seeing is America being transformed before our very eyes. I wrote Rise as a rallying cry to urge every American who loves this country, who cares about this country, every flag-waving and national anthem singing, veteran respecting, police officer honoring, founding father cherishing American who loves this country and bleeds red, white, and blue. I wrote it to educate them so we can come together and make a difference for the country.
I'm so glad you did. So let's talk about that a little bit, because I think one thing that gets confused is this idea that all Americans believe this. It's the rhetoric of the left. It's what you see on CNN and MSNBC every night. America's a white supremacist country. America is full of racists. Anyone who voted for Donald Trump is a racist. America hates foreigners. America hates immigrants. America hates Mexicans. America wants to subjugate other countries and steal their oil. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. Meanwhile, good, hardworking Americans every day are going to church, and they're going to integrated churches, and they live in integrated neighborhoods, and they're pumping gas next to people who are, ethnically, their background is different, but they just see, hey, there's another American. Hey, by the way, you left your gas tank door open. Don't forget to pop it closed. Have a great day. That's what we all see. But our news is another story. If you never watch the news, you don't know that we're such a horrible nation.
Exactly. And, the news is basically right now a generation of brainwashed reporters. Remember, for the last 25 years, because of all the money being pumped by the likes of Soros and the leftist and Islamic foundations from the Middle East, pumping millions of dollars into our universities, brainwashing kids with America is bad, Israel is evil, and everybody else is the oppressed. This created a generation of people who resent America, who do not respect America, who do not believe America is exceptional. And those who have been graduating for the last 25 years out of our universities are today the news anchors, the news writers, the news reporters, the policymakers, the foreign policy shapers. Is it any wonder after 8 years we had an Obama administration where we actually had not a commander-in-chief but an apologizer-in-chief who went around the world apologizing for America and America's ill. Thank God we have a president who is proud of America right now, sitting at the White House and empowering Americans, Stacey, like you and me and our listeners who love God, who love our country, to say we're proud of who we are. America is a blessed nation. The American people are blessed people. We have an amazing country that we need to stand up and defend. And right now, Stacey, our Judeo-Christian values are under assault. Our freedoms are under assault. When you look at our freedom of speech, for example, right now, there are people monitoring your social media, my social media, because we are influencers, because we have a voice, because you get on the airwaves every day and you express and you speak the truth, just like what we are doing right now. There are people at Facebook and Twitter and all these organizations literally monitoring people like us with employees dedicated to take any opportunity to shut down every post we post that they do not like, that they would consider as a hate speech. And that's why I wrote the book, because we need Christians, we need people who love this country, we need every person who loves America, no matter what your background, what your color, what your job, what your position, who you are, to come together to save this nation.
And so I want to piggyback off of that, because I opened the show up by telling, if you're sitting in America today, and especially for those of us who are practicing Christians, we are actually equipped for this work, just like you are equipped to write books and speak all over the country. And it's work. It's certainly not easy, but you're equipped to do it. And when you operate in your gifts, you bless other people, you educate them, you inform them. And there are millions of us out there who are, maybe we're in our children's school district, or maybe we're at our workplace, and we're equipped to do amazing things as well. We have to be willing to do them. We have to say, okay, I hear what's going on in the news media. I see what they say about America, but I know different. I'm going to do what I'm equipped to do. Can you talk about that a little bit? Because I think sometimes people mistake. They say, oh, Brigitte Gabriel, author, speaker, but there's nothing that I can do. There's plenty that we all can do.
Oh, my goodness. Thank you for preparing this whole introduction for me. And I'm going to start it with one sentence. Activate your faith. Activate your faith. We in the faith community, and I have a lot of friends who say, oh, Brigitte, I'm praying about what's happening in our country. Well, you know what? Jesus was an activist. He not only prayed to his Father, but he was an activist. When Jesus saw evil, he stood up and he fought and he expressed his opinion and he mobilized people and he created followers. And boy, oh boy, I mean, back then, can you imagine what a rebel Jesus was? So awesome. We're talking about Jesus was an activist, and this is exactly what we need to be. God does not change the world by lightning in the sky. God changes the world by using us as instruments of change. God uses his people as instruments of change. Faith without work is not enough. Faith has got to be coupled with action. Whether we are involved in every level in our community, we can make a difference. And what makes my book, Rise, different than any other book you're going to get is because in Rise, I not only discuss problems in our country. But at the end of every chapter, no matter what I'm talking about, I have a rise up and act. 3 things you can do under 10 minutes from the comfort of your home. You don't even have to stand on a street corner and demonstrate and whatever you want to do. If you want to do that, that's fine. And we have groups that we can connect you with. But everybody can do something. I have chapters in the book that talks about immigration. I have a chapter in the book about Operation Indoctrination, what's happening in our public schools and how we are losing our children. I talk about the mainstream media and Soros. I talk about the business of fake hate. Look at what the Southern Poverty Law Center is doing right now, going after organizations. Hey, even after you guys, we're all in good company. You know, FRC, Act for America, we're all hate groups. But this is why we need to know how to fight back and fight back democratically using everything that we have. So at the end of every chapter, I lay it out so simply, including how to write a letter to the editor and even have samples of letters to the editors you can literally copy and paste, and with a click you can send it to your local newspaper. The book is now on Amazon.com. You can go to Amazon. It's titled Rise in Defense of Judeo-Christian Values and Freedom.
Okay, so first off, thank you for writing the book. Thank you for breaking it down like that, because in my opinion, in the information age, in the age of news and media and instant messaging and instant activism and phones, sometimes it can feel overwhelming. You're like, there's so much that I can do. I can't do anything. And other times I feel like people are kind of saying, well, but I don't know what I can do. I mean, I see what this person's doing. And it kind of becomes over information, and then you get paralyzed. And so what you're saying is keep it simple. You have written a book. In the book, you lay out the issues. You have the whole chapter. You describe what the problems is. Then at the end, instead of saying, just sit here and feel terrible about what I told you. No, look at this. You can write a letter to your editor. Look at this. You can go to your kid's school. You can speak to the administrators. You can know that they work for you. Whatever it is that the issue in the chapter is about, then Brigitte gives you what you can do about it. And I have to reiterate what our good guest just said. If you're just now tuning into the show, we're speaking with Brigitte Gabriel. She is the author of this new book called Rise, and she's also the head of Act for America, founder and just overall, person in charge of actforamerica.org. This is so important because what you talked about with faith is true. We have to have faith and we have to pray, but then there's time to do something. Like after we're done praying, there's time to act. So can you talk a little bit more about in the book where you're talking about like immigration, for instance, what are you hoping to get Americans to understand about this issue? Because it was the key signature issue for President Trump. It's what swept him into the White House, and he's been working so hard trying to fix it. But Congress stands in his way. The Democrats stand in his way. What can we do?
Look, our nation is changing before our very eyes right now. There are many things we can do regarding immigration. We are a nation of immigrants. We welcome people who want to come here legally and become a part of the American fabric and work hard and earn their way up the ladder as high as they want to go. I am an American. I came to this country legally. But when I came here, I paid for my lawyers to do my paperwork. I paid for my airline ticket. I had to study a 2-inch thick book written by the Daughters of the American Revolution about America's history and our Constitution. And I had to pass a written exam as well as a verbal exam in English in order for me to become an American. When you go through this process, you understand our country better. You understand what a privilege it is to be an American. Right now, we are not enforcing these things anymore. Our country is changing. And this is why we need to stand with President Trump. We need to apply pressure on our elected officials to control immigration, to end the chain migration, to control the visa lottery, to understand who is coming into our country, why they are coming into our country, and those who are truly immigrating here legally and wanting to become a part of our American family, contribute to America, be a part of the American fabric. We welcome them with open arms. We will do everything to help them, but we want to make sure the right people are coming into the country, not people who do not share our values, do not respect our Constitution, do not respect our way of life. If they don't like America and what America offers, do not try to change us. Maybe they should consider immigrating somewhere else.
Oh, I know. There's so many other countries out there that are more socialist, that are smaller, that don't have as much capitalism, that don't have as much wealth or power or influence. Countries where there's more command and control structure, where you can't own a gun. There are plenty of countries that are already like that. So if you have an issue, whether it's guns, immigration, the government, the size of our country, how many rich people we have here, how much, conveniences and how fancy our country is, because honestly, it's just so fancy. I think some people are overwhelmed, and that's why they want to tear it down and make it like, a third world pit. But it's actually really great. So if you don't want to live here, if this is too much for you, you could just go to a third world pit and have instant gratification. Or you could go to Venezuela and experience socialism. You could go to Germany and experience not being able to own a gun. I mean, there's a country for whatever you're looking for anywhere you look. Even if you want to practice Islam and only be able to live under Sharia, there's like 49 countries where you can go do that easily. I mean, I don't understand why people are so bent on making America into something else when there's something else available to them all over. And I want to point listeners to your website, actforamerica.org, 1 million members strong, the nation's largest national security grassroots organization, actforamerica.org. You can sign up to receive the alerts. You can start your own chapter. You can support the movement. So this is where all of the Brigitte Gabriel, it all concentrates together here on this website. But what would you say is I want to just ask you, I guess this is our last question because I'm looking at the time. Brigitte, I don't know if you saw it today, but Facebook is thinking of implementing the same kind of Chinese command and control structure where they have a rating for you online. And you mentioned how Facebook and the other online social media, they monitor us. They try to tamp us down because we're on the right. What do you think is going to be the backlash associated with them trying to give every user a trust rating and kind of controlling our content based on that?
A huge backlash, because right now they have become a monopoly. Right now you have 21, 22-year-olds working at Facebook who are deciding whether your voice and my voice should be, if we should have a presence or a voice in our American society. They even want to block our voice from those who follow us on our social media who want to hear our voice. This is exactly why we are working with members of Congress right now. Act for America is working with members of Congress and actually doing the proper. I don't want to reveal, more details.
Sure.
In doing the proper things to make sure that Facebook, all these tech giants, Facebook, Google, and Twitter, that we can have fair representation and our voices will be heard. We do not want monopolies in the United States. Monopolies were never allowed to continue and grow in the United States. And I think social media, especially Facebook right now, has gotten to this point. And I think at this point, Congress needs to intervene to make sure that freedom of speech is protected in the United States, even though it may offend some people, but the truth should be able to get out, and Americans are smart enough to make up their own mind as to what they want to believe, how they want to vote, and who they want to follow.
You know what? I love you, girl. You're just awesome every single time. Good luck with the book. I already have my stuff. Mine will be here in 2 days via Amazon. So I'm going to be reading the book and talking about it more on the show. Good luck with everything. God bless. And thank you for your time today.
Thank you. God bless you. Thank you very much.
All right. Perfect. So we will be back with more right after this. Stay there.
What does it take to live an uncommon life? Here's former Super Bowl winning coach Tony Dungy with today's uncommon moment.
How often have you seen a team jump out to a big lead and then change their offense or defense, or just relax a little bit thinking that the game is already won? You'd think they would continue to play the same tough defense that had been successful, persevering until they won. But they don't, and they lose. There's always something left to be done right until the very end. The race of faithfulness is different for each person. Your job is to remain faithful and run it until the end, keeping the prize in your sights. The prize for finishing the race and remaining faithful is the crown of righteousness that He will give us when He returns.
New York Times best-selling author Tony Dungy. Discover more at CoachDungy.com. That's CoachDungy.com.
It's time to call your senators. We need to tell them to put an end to the liberals' filibuster, switch to a majority vote, and defund Planned Parenthood. Call the Capitol Switchboard at 202-224-3121 or go to afaaction.net. Senators respond to constituent calls. So call 202-224-3121 and tell your senators to switch to a majority vote and defund Planned Parenthood. Your call will make a difference.
Chris Brooks.
We cannot underestimate the responsibility of evangelism. That is why shows like this, Equipped, which is committed to equipping you every day to live, share, and defend your faith, are extremely important, because anyone who does not confess Jesus Christ as their Lord and Savior is outside of God's saving grace.
Equipped. Weekdays at noon Central on Urban Family Talk.
From America's election headquarters.
In an era of hyper-political partisanship, independent candidates from around the country gathered in Denver this past weekend for a summit held by Unite America, an organization endorsing around 24 independent candidates in state and national elections. The organization is focusing on candidates it finds viable and backing them with money and support. Executive Director Nick Troiano says they especially want independents to win seats in closely divided state legislatures.
Just a small handful of independents in closely divided legislatures can make a really big difference, because they can deny both parties an outright majority. And they can use their incredible leverage in controlling the balance of power to force greater cooperation and compromise between both sides.
A recent Gallup poll shows that more and more Americans are opting out of both the Republican and Democratic parties. In Denver, Alicia Acuna, Fox News.
This is Stacy on the Right with Stacy Washington on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
Well, thank you so much for being here today. I am just excited, and I want to encourage you. You can weigh in on our interview with Brigitte Gabriel, actforamerica.org, or anything else that we've been discussing so far this program. You can call into the show at 866-963-2037. It's 866-963-2037. And we can chat about whatever it is that you'd like. It's the end of the first hour, and we like to do that in our last segment, is take calls if you'd like to do that. What I'm interested in getting to is, I mean, she was talking so fast and covering information so quickly. It's like it was like a fire hose. We got it all, and it was fantastic. And I love her website. It's very interactive, very easy to navigate and kind of pick something that you want to go into. I think that story about Facebook and what they've been up to, this idea that they're going to kind of give you a rating, if you will, it coincides with another story that's out today about another organization that's kind of stood itself up and is trying to take the role of rating news organizations. So it's a news organization rating company, and it also will rate bloggers. It will rate blogs that are conservative leaning and, according to them, everyone, liberal leaning, et cetera, et cetera. And what they're doing now is they're taking big sites and they're poking around and they're looking for certain things. Like they have a list of things that you have to do if you want a good rating for them, which is interesting because they're making the list of things that you need to do to get a good rating from them. Like you ask, like who asked you to rate me? I'm like that type of thing. They're called newsguardtech.com. And what they're doing is they're saying, any good website would have a list of who works there. Any good website would say what their mission is. Any good website would say who's funding them. Any good website would say, how long they've been fact-checking themselves. Who's the fact-checker for your website? Which is a little weird, because if you're putting all the content together yourself, then how do you have anybody who's fact-checking you? I think fact checkers are called editors. So whoever's editing your website would be the one who would possibly be, fact checking, quote unquote. It's interesting to me that this is going on right now because it's right before the election. So it wouldn't surprise me if this site Let me give it to you again. NewsGuardTech.com. It wouldn't surprise me if NewsGuardTech.com had some connection or ties to Facebook. And that when you have a good rating from them, Facebook will promote your information. And if you have a bad rating, then your information will just go out into the ether. That's how it feels sometimes when I'm on and I have an active Facebook page where I post every day, but I have much less engagement on my page than I have a number of people who like it. And the reason I know it's not the actual people who've liked it, who've just unplugged, is that sometimes I'll get a message from someone who'll say, I haven't seen you in ages. I haven't seen a post from you in 2 years, one lady said. And I was like, I messaged her back. I'm like, well, what happened? And she said, I don't know. I just hadn't seen a post from you. I thought maybe you'd stopped. And she said, and then today I saw a post from you. I clicked on it and realized you've been here the whole time. I haven't unliked your page. Well, if you don't have click notifications, see first, and you can only have so many of those that you actually have selected to see first. I've tried it. I've tried to put all of the websites I like to see, select them and say see first. There's a certain number you can get to before they stop doing that. So Facebook, it's like every time you figure out how it works, they change it a little bit. All right, so my call screening software is down again, and I tried to open it up a couple times while I'm talking here, and it's not working. Let's go to Mark in Ohio. Mark, thank you so much for calling into the show today.
Hello?
Hi.
Hi, I can barely hear you. It was like that last week when I called in, too. I can barely hear you. I apologize if I talked over you.
Okay, sorry. Well, go ahead. What's your comment?
I'm sure you've heard the phrase, America's great because America is good.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah. Alexis de Tocqueville, a French researcher, he came up with that back in the 1800s. But he also said it wasn't until he went into the churches and heard America's pulpits aflame with righteousness that was the secret to America being good, was good preaching, solid teaching. And I really think it's way past time for Christians to raise their voice and demand, I do mean demand, that their pastors get back to the Word of God and quit preaching this wimpy Christianity because, Josh McDowell and others have proven we've got a huge problem with pornography and stuff like that going on in the church. Just because Trump won doesn't mean we're going to get holier. And I really believe that more important than the politics in this country, and I am concerned about the politics, and I think Trump's doing a great job, but I think Christians need to demand that their pastors start getting back to the Word of God. And even if pastors won't do that they are asked to step down, because we've got a huge problem in this country with pastors that are just ego-driven, nickels and nose-counting people, and they don't preach the Word, and they're creating a dumbed-down body of Christ in this country.
Mark, thank you so much for that comment, and I'm gonna talk about that a little bit. I'm gonna let you go. Thank you for calling the show today and last week, and thank you for that fantastic comment. So let me just append what Mark has said so eloquently by pointing out that he didn't say or leave the church. He said demand that pastors preach the Word of God and Jesus Christ crucified, or they step down. In other words, the body does not leave. You don't scatter the church because you have a pastor who's not feeding the sheep. You actually do the opposite. You say, "Sir, you're not able to tend this flock. We need new leadership." That is a radical concept for a lot of Christians who are used to just saying, I'm not getting fed here, and they leave. And you see that happening sometimes with churches where they'll have the seats will be packed, and then the next year, the seats aren't so packed, and within 2 years, you see it looks like there's about half as many people. Well, people are leaving because either they want their ears tickled and it's not happening, or they want some meat. They want red meat. They're tired of milk. They're not baby Christians anymore, and they're not getting that. And so I just encourage you, when Mark didn't call here by accident today, you're not listening to this show on your way to or from or in your earbuds or whatever you're doing. It's not an accident you just heard him say that. If you're in a church where you're not sure where the pastor stands on whether or not a human life starts at conception, he never preaches about the genocide that's going on in America that is abortion on demand. If your pastor never talks about it's an absolute sin what is going on in this country. It's a travesty. It is an absolute atrocity what is going on in this country with children who are confused and they need counseling. They're being allowed to take drugs to alter their chemical makeup, and their bodies are being destroyed and mutilated on the altar of this sexual perversion known as transgenderism. This is the battleground. And so we have to be willing to fight. If we're not willing to fight, it means you're willing to be told what to do. There are only two camps. There's the camp where you just say, what would you like me to do? And then you do it, no matter what it is, no matter if it has to do with your kids or your home life or your family life. And then the other camp is you're going to control yourself. You're going to exercise your rights, God-given rights under the Constitution. And if someone tells you to do something that's wrong, you're going to stand up and say, no. And also, you're no longer in charge because you are wrong. Your mental processes are not functioning properly. You don't have all of your synapses firing. You got to go. And that's what Mark is talking about. We have to get fired up. And I'm not talking about fired up like Maxine Waters recommended that Democrats run people out of public. No, that's not American. That's not what we do here. I'm talking about getting fired up in a way that you've been activated. You know what God's word says. You know what you're supposed to be listening to from your leader in the pulpit. And if you're not hearing that, then you start questioning whether or not that person should be there leading the flock, not whether or not the flock should be there. That's the wrong way. We've been taught to just go somewhere else. And there are times when you just have to get up and go. You know, things are being taught improperly and everybody else is in sync with it. And you know that's not the word of God. You get up and go. But if it's the congregation not being fed, if people aren't being led in a proper way, that's not for the congregation to lead. That's for that pastor to go. And it's funny that he mentioned that right now, because this morning I was in attendance at the Watchman on the Wall for Family Research Council. And they had a fantastic program today in St. Louis. They have a culture impact team resource manual for pastors and congregations to implement these culture impact teams, how to establish a ministry at your church. This is for impacting the culture, because right now it's as if the church is disconnected from the culture. It's as if the church operates in its own little galaxy, and then everything else is somewhere else. We're not of the world, but we definitely live in this space. We should be impacting the culture for Christ, not the other way around, with all of our children leaving the church feeling like it's not relevant anymore. It's relevant. So there were a number of speakers this morning. It was one of those programs where I just sat there. I was like, oh, here comes somebody else great. Here comes somebody else great. So in this culture impact team manual from the Family Research Council, they have an introduction, casting the vision, getting started, and it helps you to create a culture impact team in your local church, inform, equip, alert, and mobilize, and then the pastor generates the team, or the membership generates the team. You develop a statement of mission and purpose, you organize the members, you develop a budget, you set up a culture impact center, you begin strategy meetings, and it has all of that laid out for you. So this isn't a case of, do something for the culture. All right, thanks for coming. No, this is the actual manual, like literally a manual to tell you what to do. And then you take it and you implement it, and then watch God work. You pray over your work, God brings the increase. So when we're talking about that, I'm going to give you a couple of verses here in these last few minutes of this first hour. And in hour two, when we come back, we're going to be listening to some audio from Tucker Carlson talking about U.S. citizens advocating for China. This is a huge, big issue for us because the media refuses to talk about anything but Russia. But we have to be informed, so we're going to get into that here on this show. Let's first, Zephaniah 3:17. The Lord your God is in your midst. He is a mighty one who will save. He will rejoice over you with gladness. He will quiet you by his love. He will exult over you with loud singing. So when you read that, we're talking about the God who created everything that you see, the God of the universe, the God who literally spoke the universe into being, a universe that is so large it is difficult for us as human beings to fathom all of it in its completeness. He's intimately interested in you and your everyday life, your troubles, your sorrows, your highs, your lows, your joys, everything. And that he rejoices over you with gladness when you're obedient. He quiets you with his love when you have in anything that's going on that's a difficult thing for you. And he exults over you with loud singing. The kind of the way we do with our children. I mean, have you ever had a toddler, finally get their potty training right for a whole day in a row and you're just running around with that toddler singing and rejoicing and y'all are doing the happy dance. That's how God is about us. But it's so much more than that because we can only comprehend our type of love towards our children, which to me, it's almost the most complete kind of love that you can have when you love a child, your young child that you love. It's such an all-encompassing, complete type of love. But God has something even greater than that for us. And then in Proverbs 16:3, it says, commit your works unto the Lord, and your thoughts will be established. So when we say, Lord, I want to start this culture impact team. I want to start this at my church, or, I want to bring this to my pastor. I want to get together with my Bible study group from church, and I want to go over this manual. I want to see if anybody else feels the vision. And then, Lord, I want to take this to the pastor and say, here are the workers. Here's the toolkit. Can you look at it and let us know if this is something we can do at church? And Lord, can you bless that? Watch God work. Watch God work. When you want to impact the culture for the kingdom, oh, you better believe God's going to put some heat up underneath that. And that's what we need right now. It's one thing to come on the radio and talk about this for 2 hours a day. It's another thing to read for hours and hours and to kind of immerse myself in this is what's happening, this is what's happening. But if you're never given anything that you can actually do, what are we doing here? So this is the reason why I feel I'm on this radio right now talking to you. It's fantastic to speak to you on the phone and to take your calls, to see the comments on Facebook and YouTube and everywhere else. It's wonderful, and I want to keep doing that. But we have to be workers, rightly dividing the word of truth and going out into this world this is a world that is hungry and starving to death. And we Christians, we have the keys and the map to the buffet of all ages. We have to tell the hungry, starving people, hey, it's over here. And then point them in the right direction, walk with them. Some of them will need to be carried on your back to the buffet. They're that weak. And get them their first plate. And then say, now it's your choice. If you want to keep eating here, you know what you got to do. You got to come to the Lord. He's already laid it out for us. He sent his son to die on the cross. And if you don't know him, all you have to do is say, Father, I believe that Jesus Christ is the Son of God, and he died on the cross to save me from my sins and rose again on the third day and is seated at the right hand of the Father. Holy Spirit, come, please. Save me, make me whole and clean and right with you, and then find a church, get baptized, and welcome to the buffet. That's what's required. So what are we going to do? I'll be back with Hour 2 right after these messages.
Urban Family Talk. American Family Coffee is coffee with a cause. Not only is it a delicious way to start your day, but it can also wake you up to the idea of supporting the American Family Association through a product you'd normally buy anyway. Choose from morning blend, evening blend, and everything in between. Get your American Family Coffee and support the American Family Association at afastore.net. Truth, wisdom, empowerment. Urban Family Talk, a ministry of the American Family Association.
American Family News, I'm Rusty Pugh. The Trump administration is taking aim at more Obama-era regulations. John Decker has more.
The EPA proposal, which critics say would be a blow to environmental regulations aimed at reducing carbon emissions, would allow states to set their own emission standards for coal-fueled power plants. Acting EPA Administrator Andrew Wheeler.
We will give states and the private sector the regulatory certainty they need to invest in new technologies and provide clean, affordable, and reliable energy for all Americans.
President Trump will likely tout the proposal this evening during a campaign-style rally with supporters in Charleston, West Virginia. At the White House, John Decker, Fox News.
A Colorado man, Christopher Watts, has been charged with the murder of his pregnant wife, Shannon Watts, and his 2 daughters, and is due in court today. Weld County District Attorney Michael Rourke says Watts is being charged with one new count, saying he meant to also kill his unborn child.
It's a fairly new crime that the General Assembly in Colorado passed a couple of years ago. It talks about with the intent to terminate the pregnancy, the defendant caused the death of an individual, thereby resulting in the termination of the pregnancy. It is a Class 2 felony because the mother of the child is deceased or died as a result of his actions.
Police say Watts confessed to killing his wife, but claims he didn't kill his children. 2 boys have been recovered from the scene of a car wreck that had gone unnoticed for days. Eben Brown reports.
Drivers on busy Highway 24 in the town of Camden, Arkansas, south of Little Rock, didn't know 2 young boys were inside a wrecked car with the body of their dead mother for 2 days.
Anybody passing by would never notice that. They went through a pure hell.
Lieutenant Nathan Greeley with the local sheriff. The boys are 3 and 1. They had no food, no water, and 25-year-old mother Lisa Holloman was killed. Her father, the boy's grandfather, says she was expecting.
We just found that out at the hospital that she was pregnant. We didn't know. We lost 2.
Eben Brown, Fox News.
Netflix is changing the way it allows users to interact with its site, closing down the user comment function and deleting all the comments that have ever been posted. And Steve Jordahl reports that's one less way to appeal to the streaming service to take down some offensive and even dangerous content.
For several months, American Family Association has been asking listeners to urge Netflix to take down the popular teen drama 13 Reasons Why, after learning that at least one teen, and possibly several more, copied the suicide of its lead character.
I killed the enemy. Like you said.
I said we all killed him.
Netflix more recently posted a film with what many consider to be child pornography. But concerned parents and viewers now have one less avenue of communication with the movie service after it took away the ability to review content. Walker Wildman of American Family Association.
It seems to be along the same lines that we've been seeing where Netflix is essentially disabling any kind of dissension.
The company says they removed it for lack of use, and the service was intended to help other viewers choose what they wanted to watch. But Wildman says it's one less tool for parents.
By removing the user's ability to post reviews on certain shows, it really gives users no other option but to watch the content or unsubscribe.
But there are still other ways to communicate with the streaming service.
I would just encourage them to call Netflix directly, call their headquarters, or email their offices. Continue to voice your frustration, maybe on social media.
You can find the number at afa.net/Netflix. I'm Steve Jordahl.
And Microsoft says it's uncovered some Russian hacking.
Microsoft says 2 conservative groups, the Hudson Institute and the International Republican Institute, were targeted. The company says a hacking group tied to the Russian government created fake internet domains and spoofed the political groups. This comes just weeks after a similar discovery by Microsoft-led Senator Claire McCaskill, a Democrat who's running for re-election in Missouri, to reveal that Russian hackers tried to infiltrate her Senate computer network. Tanya J. Powers, Fox News.
American Family News is online at onenewsnow.com. I'm Rusty Pugh.
Please call your senators today. It's time to put an end to the liberals' filibuster. Tell your senators to switch to a majority vote and defund Planned Parenthood now. Call the Capitol Switchboard at 202-224-3121 or go to afaaction.net. Again, call 202-224-3121 and tell your senators to switch to a majority vote and defund Planned Parenthood. Your call will make a difference.
She's sharp, pointed, and insightful. This is Stacy on the Right on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
We will not stand for the vile smears, the hateful attacks, and the vicious assaults on the courageous men and women of ICE, Border Patrol, and law enforcement. We will protect those who protect us.
No one's talking about the fact that Donald Trump said Mexico is going to pay for the wall. He's talking about shutting down the U.S. government because of funding for the wall that he said Mexico was going to pay for.
The extremists who attack ICE and CBC like to portray themselves as champions of social justice. They are not. People are dying because of their either lack of knowledge lack of understanding, or just plain stupidity.
So the intimation is when you introduce somebody who's Hispanic that he can't speak perfect English, which is why the president went out of his way.
Okay, Trump is bad. Okay, fine.
And now, Stacey Washington.
Yeah, Trump is bad. Welcome back to the program. Great to be with you today. I just want to let you know that I've already gone onto the NewsGuard Tech website, and I've sent in a request as a freelance writer and radio host, so in other words, member of the media, to get a feedback on whether or not this organization is truly neutral. And why would I be concerned with that? Well, I'm concerned with it because in my mind, an organization that immediately begins work on rating conservative sites like PJ Media might have a bit of an agenda that they're working through. So I've asked them this question. NewsGuard. They have a contact NewsGuard give feedback page on their website. They have a list of everyone who works there, and I looked down the list. I didn't recognize any names, which is not odd. I mean, the place just started up. I asked them, how many of your employees are politically conservative, right-leaning, or open Republicans? How do you handle bias within your organization? What information can you provide to assure the public that you are a neutral public ratings organization and are not working on behalf of the Democrats? I look forward to your responses. And I gave them contact information to get back with me. And I will be posting a screenshot of that particular missive that I sent over on my Twitter account and on Facebook. And I look forward to posting their response. And I'm hoping that it's on the up and up and it's above board. But in my mind, something that stood up just now right before the midterms where they're rating conservative organizations, I wouldn't be surprised to find out that they're funded by George Soros or one of the offshoots of George Soros's, progressive organizations, or that they have some kind of backhanded ties way back deep in the background to Facebook. So we'll see. We'll see what their response is, but I look forward to hearing from them. The fact that they have a give feedback tab on their website, hopefully they will respond. So you were just listening to a mashup of different audio bits from the show today. And right now we're going to have quite a bit from Tucker Carlson because he had a couple of fantastic guests on his show. And I want to unpack the conversations that they had because let's face it, we're not getting this from regular media. No one else is talking about the fact that China is a bad actor and they are so deeply embedded into our American institutions, technology, universities, in the education side. All of it is, why are they here? Because they want what we have. They want our brain power, but they don't want Americans because Americans are used to freedom and freedom of speech and liberty and, voting and doing whatever we want and leaving the country and, not being Americans if we don't want to, being Americans but living abroad if we want to. They're not into that kind of stuff. So they don't want Americans, but they want what Americans make. They want our intellectual property. And they want to achieve dominance over the world stage. They want to usurp our power base. So how do they do that? Well, it's kind of hard to do if the government is run by rabidly pro-American interests. But how do you get a rabidly pro-American interest to be rabidly pro-China? Well, you can pay them to do that because we allow lobbying in this country. And so that's what they're doing. Here in this bit, number 3, we're here Tucker Carlson talking about U.S. citizens, some of whom you're going to be really surprised to hear are doing this, advocating for China.
Well, China is working hard to overtake the United States as the most powerful country in the world economically and militarily. It's a struggle that will define future generations for Americans. And yet, remarkably, not all Americans are taking their country's side in this conflict. There are plenty of high-level American officials now on China's payroll, many of them. For example, Mickey Kanter was U.S. Trade Representative from 1993 to 1996. He was a close advisor to Bill Clinton. Now he's on the advisory board of a Chinese smart TV manufacturer. As we've covered on this show, Marco Rubio, among others, fears that these televisions could be used to spy on Americans. It's not a crazy fear. Meanwhile, former Congressman Rick Boucher, a Republican of Virginia, works as the lead lobbyist for Hikvision. That's a Chinese video surveillance company, because that's not creepy or anything. Even former House Speaker John Boehner is a pro-China lobbyist now.
John Boehner? John Boehner. So, in other words, people who are no longer in government but know how government works and have an extensive list of contacts, people that they can call or email and get information, back channel, unofficial verification of something that's happening or something that's never going to happen, those contacts remain, and John Boehner would be one of those people. You might think, oh, he's been out of government for a while. Sure, he has, but not long enough for his contact list to be bad. Oh, he's somebody who he's got a contact list. I don't know anybody who wouldn't like to, John, could you share your contact list? And if he said yes, we'd be like, woohoo, that's the email list you want to have. But I probably don't have enough money to get John Boehner to share his list with me. So the Chinese government, they have enough. They definitely made him an offer that he couldn't refuse, and now he's advocating for them. And in the big scheme of things, if we just look at it on the surface level, you're like, oh, what's wrong with him lobbying? That's a perk and benefit of having served at a high level in the federal government in Washington, D.C. He was the Speaker of the House. He's going to have something he can do with that after he leaves office. If you don't think that that's the case, then being naive. I agree. He does have every right to make a living now that he's not the Speaker of the House anymore. And he can lobby on behalf of foreign governments, foreign organizations, et cetera, et cetera. But why are we not hearing the Democrats beating a drum of China, China, China when China tries to impact our elections? China would love to see America be just America, not the United States of America. If we had a seceded California and a seceded Texas and, Florida was on the cusp, maybe it's thinking about seceding, and the rest of the country is in turmoil, fighting amongst itself about what does this country look like if we're not the United States of America, if we're just a loose conglomeration of states with individual GDPs. And how do I know they like that? Look at Wikipedia. Wikipedia treats the United States as if it's a bunch of individual countries that join together to call itself the United States, and they measure us that way, but then they measure each state individually. This is not a new concept. Around the globe, there are plenty of despots and ne'er-do-wells who would love to see the United States of America, which is one nation united under God, indivisible. They'd love to see it just be, Georgia's a state, Mississippi's a state, because individually our states are still powerhouses of GDP and production, but the cohesive nature of our country, the 50 states joined together, plus, some territories and the District of Washington, D.C., the District of Columbia, it's hard to beat. It's hard to come up against it. And as much as we like to decry California and talk about how they're not doing what they need to do, just think about the GDP of California. It's top 10 in the world. California by itself. Same with Texas. I mean, we have some amazing things going on here in this country. Our country is amazing. Together, it's unstoppable. But it's not because of us individually, like we're just so fantastic. It's unstoppable because it's one nation under God. So back to Tucker Carlson. He has Gertz on to talk about China's influence operations and how they've been extremely effective on U.S. policy. Extremely effective. Now, what would you say is the ratings level for Putin's operations to influence American politics? I'd say he gets a so-so rating. If it's capitalizing on the divisions in the United States, he's been very successful at doing that. But in influencing governmental policy, Putin hasn't been so strong. So here is Gertz talking about how China has been extremely effective.
Bill Gertz is a senior editor at the Washington Free Beacon, and he joins us now. Bill, you've heard a lot of people say in the past couple of months, so-and-so is betraying his country, acting against American interests. Here you have a bipartisan collection of people who are demonstrably working against America's interests, and that's okay in Washington? How does that work?
It's a huge problem. China's information and influence operations have been extremely effective. They're literally buying up former officials. They're utilizing coercive measures to get U.S. businessmen who have interests in China to do their bidding, and very little is being done about it. I mean, we hear a lot about Russian influence operations. What China has been doing over the last 30 years is huge compared to what the Russians have done in terms of influencing the U.S. government. They've literally changed the direction of American foreign policy towards China.
And it's terrifying. And unlike Russia, China actually has promised of overtaking the United States as the preeminent nation in the world. They're our rival. They're a threat to our interests. So why is it socially acceptable for Rick Boucher or Mickey Cantor or John Boehner, God help him, to lobby openly on behalf of China?
Why is that so, okay? It's because that's not the focus of our media. It's not actually okay. And I think if Americans knew what was going on, it would be even less okay. Most Americans, if they saw this on the nightly news, they would be disturbed. And I'm not talking about card-carrying, Bible-thumping, AR-15 cleaning on a weekly or monthly basis Americans. I'm not talking about your dyed-in-the-wool conservatives who you're presently working on memorizing scripture. I'm not talking about us. I said Americans, so regular Joes who might be Democrats, might be union members, these are good Americans too. It's not that the only good Americans in this country are on the right. There's plenty of people in this country who, if they thought that John Boehner was lobbying on behalf of China and actually impacting U.S. policy, they would put that coffee cup down or that dinner, you put your fork down at the dinner table and they'd say, now, wait a minute now. China? They would stop feeding the kids for a second and say, I need to read up some more on that after we get the kids in bed tonight. The parents would just look over the table at each other and say, China? Yeah, of course they would. So this idea that it's not important to Americans, that's not the case. It's important. It's just not being reported. You got to listen to American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk to get this information, because they're just not going to talk about it. Yeah, Fox News, absolutely. And with reach like that, you might say, oh, it's covered. But that's the conservative audience and people who like to hear the truth, but they like to kind of, dance around it and say, oh, I only watch Fox to see what the opposition is saying. No, you watch it because you like it. You like all the pretty people on there and you like getting facts. Yeah, don't act like we don't know what you're doing. But other than that, who's covering this? NBC, nightly news, CBS? No, they're not covering it. So they've got U.S. officials, people who have, like I said, it's this email contact list they have that's so valuable. They're buying up these former officials. They're buying them up. They're utilizing coercive measures to get U.S. businessmen who have interest in China to do their bidding. So in other words, yeah, I know your plant, it needs expanding. Your business is booming in the United States. You're spreading out. You're now doing some international shipping on your widget. And you want to expand your factory here in China. And we'll let you expand it. But first, we need some introductions. We are interested in the governor of your state. We noticed that in social media that you golf together. We'd like to speak to the governor of your state. Well, I don't know if I can make that introduction. We'd like to speak to the governor of your state. We want an introduction. And by introduction, we mean we're going to have some Chinese officials in your state, and we want you to arrange some travel time with the governor and you and these officials. Or you just may not be able to get that expansion that you're looking for. And you won't be able to get it here or in Taiwan or anywhere in Asia. We'll make sure you can't expand your plant anywhere that we have any interest in unless you get us that meeting. You see how that works? And we're worried about Russia. Yes, we can chew gum and tie our shoes at the same time. The point is, we're not talking about China at all. When we get back, we'll have more for you. Stay right there.
When our health insurance renewal notice arrived last fall, my wife and I made the decision to drop our plan. With the monthly premiums and deductible, we'd have to pay $30,000 just to use it. So we did our homework and switched to MediShare. The cost savings are incredible, over $500 a month. and we don't have to pay for services we don't need or don't agree with. Then, out of the blue, she had to have emergency surgery. Scary stuff. $150,000 in hospital bills, and Medishare members took care of everything. All we paid was our small portion. I'm a doctor who's been in healthcare for 20 years, and this is one of the most impressive programs I've ever seen. Thank God she's fully recovered, and now we're telling everyone about Medishare.
Call 855-PSALM-23 to find out how much you can save on your healthcare. Medishare. Call 855-PSALM-23. That's 855-PSALM-23.
This is Viewpoints with Kirby Anderson.
As we approach the November midterm elections, it's worth mentioning once again the need for states and local jurisdictions to clean up their voter rolls. The recent special election in Ohio was yet another reminder of the fact that there is still a lot of work to be done. The race between Republican Troy Balderson and Democratic Danny O'Connor ended up being very close. That means the counting of absentee ballots and provisional ballots will be important and could make the difference. Close elections like this illustrate the need for accurate voter rolls and the need for voter ID. One expert with the Government Accountability Institute reports that there are 170 registered voters in Ohio's 12th congressional district that were listed as being over 116 years old. In case you're wondering, the world's oldest living person is a 115-year-old resident of Japan. You would think that that fact alone would be reason enough to start cleaning up the voter rolls and to implement voter ID. But just look at the responses on Twitter when Shannon Bream of Fox News posted her tweet about 170 voters in Ohio race over 116 years old. Or look at the response when talk show host Kevin McCullough posted that this was an argument for voter ID. The responses range from claims that voter ID is racist and elitist to those who point to voter fraud that led to the election of Donald Trump. That one got me. On the one hand, they believe that Russian tampering led to the illegitimate election of the president, but also believe that there is no possibility that election fraud could occur in the recent congressional special election. One report estimates that there are 248 counties in this country that have more names on the voter rolls than the total number of people of voting age in those counties. That's too much opportunity for mischief. It is time to clean up the voter rolls. I'm Kirby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
Take Kirby and the Point of View team with you on the go with the Point of View app. Search for Point of View Radio at the Apple or Google Play stores.
You can watch a live stream of the show on Facebook or YouTube at Stacy on the Right. Now, back to the show on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
Why does nobody say, well, wait a second, what are you doing acting against America's interests?
Well, up until the Trump administration, there was this narrative through successive Republican and Democratic administrations. The big propaganda theme was China is not a threat. Trump has come out and said, hey, look, the emperor has no clothes. China is a threat. And it's not just limited to these former officials and congressmen and former commerce and officials and the like. They're actually going after former military officials. There's a program called the Sonia Initiative, which was launched about 10 years ago by the former vice chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Admiral Bill Owens. And he basically has made tens of millions of dollars in China, and he formed this organization of former military officials who literally lobbied Congress and the administration to do China's bidding.
Did you hear that? He's literally lobbied the government of the United States to do the bidding of China, and he did that for money. Meanwhile, Brennan calls our sitting president of the United States a treasonous traitor because he's done business with some Russians when he was a member of the private sector. But these guys are literally, it's not enough for them to just, lobby individually. China is going after congressmen, former commerce officials, etc. But the military officials they like the most because the military officials have this credibility that even some other members of the government they can't match that credibility factor if you served honorably in the U.S. forces, especially these men at very high-ranking levels where they're making decisions that literally troops are being moved and the enemy's being killed. Resources are being allocated. companies are growing exponentially because of the military purchases that are being made for hardware. These men have had ultimate power, and now they're in the private sector. And the Chinese government is like, you'd be perfect for us because we need help with the U.S. government. And who better to make the foray for us than someone who served honorably and is now in the private sector? And so these men, the former vice chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Admiral Bill Owens, this is a man who still has staff. He's retired now, but he still has staffers. He still has people who handle not just his mail, but his speaking engagements and his calendar and his schedule. He is still a man of power and influence. And he put together an organization of former military officials who literally lobbied Congress and the administration to do China's bidding. And that's not anything to be concerned about, news media. Where is Don Lemon with one of his contributors on the show crying about how horrible it is that this is happening? Where are the talking heads and pundits slamming their hands on the table and telling other people to get out? Get out. You know, basically losing all of their candor and decorum over emotional laden responses over stuff that really, it matters neither here nor there except to the individuals that are involved. And you know what I'm talking about. I'm going to go ahead and say it. People who've experienced racial incidents. Ding, ding, ding. It's happened to me. But a racial incident that happened to me or me and my husband in St. Louis County doesn't have any bearing on the national stage. And that is what we're doing. We're elevating individual stories, which, you know, some of them are, it's painful. It's like people are mean. People are rude. People are going to people. We're elevating that to a national story when the real national story is, why hasn't some, you know, hardtack reporter who's good in the scrum, how hasn't some person like that not come forward and said, I'd like an interview with Admiral Bill Owens, please. Reach out to some of his staff and say, hey, you know, we hear he started this organization that lobbies on behalf of China. We'd like to talk to him about it. Reaching out for an interview. Who is it? Who's reaching out for the interview? NBC News. You better believe those staffers would be scurrying around and they would get at the Admiral. They'd get him on the, hey, sir, we got NBC News asking about, you know, whatever the organization is. They want to know, they want to talk to you about, they want an interview. They'd have to figure some stuff out quick, wouldn't they? And then if NBC was asking for the interview, and you know how all the reporters talk, maybe somebody from, I don't know, Time Magazine, Newsweek, anybody. If you're in the media, if you're working for an organization and your email ends with thatorganization.com, how about you reach out to Admiral Bill Owens and say, dude, we heard you made tens of millions of dollars lobbying for the Chinese. Care to talk about it? Can you explain to us what that's all about? We just want to know. I mean, this sounds much more interesting than the Bourne series where Jason Bourne does all that stuff around the world. He's an agent. He's something. This is much more interesting than that. I'd love to see Netflix make a movie about this instead of making all the ridiculous movies that they're trying to destroy the children of America, which, by the way, is why I don't mind telling you we don't have Netflix anymore. We don't have it. We cut them off because they are putting out content that harms children and they don't want to hear our objections over it. And so we cut them off. It's just a little sidebar. So this is what's going on here. This is what's happening. And it's not okay for this to be the situation. It's not okay for this to be the matter of course for our government to, you got the former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. He was a retired admiral. He is a retired admiral of the United States Navy, later vice chairman of the Joint Chiefs. Since leaving the military in 1996, Bill Owens has served as an executive or as a member of the board of directors for various companies, including Nortel Networks Corporation. He's 78 years old. He's well educated. And yeah, he's written a book, Lifting the Fog of War. He co-wrote that with Edward Offley. And let's see what else we've got here. He's joined the visualization software company's board of advisors. The company's name is Idelix. And that was in 2002. And then, of course, he did a leaders interview with leadersmag.com. He was at that point when they did this interview, he was the CenturyLink. He was in leadership in CenturyLink. What an amazing bio this guy has. He's the former CEO and vice chairman of Nortel Networks, the CEO and chairman of Teledesic. He founded the technology companies Lumira, Extend America, AmeriLink, Yangtze, Flow Mobile, Red Bison, and Prometheus. In 2004, Owens received the Intrepid Salute Award in recognition of his business achievements in support of important philanthropic activities. He's been awarded the French Ordre National de Légion d'Honneur and was David Sarnoff Award winner for his contribution to advanced technology. He received his master's degree in business from George Washington and is a graduate of the U.S. Naval Academy and Oxford University. So a well-educated man who served his country honorably and then went on to leverage his education and background with the U.S. military and his contact list into corporation after corporation after corporation. He wrote more than 50 articles on national security. He's authored 2 books. One is called High Seas, and the other one I already mentioned. Now, these are not companies we've never heard of before. Nortel Networks. So the question is, somewhere in this interview, perhaps they ask him about his work lobbying for the Chinese. Military preparedness and spending they asked him about. When you left the military, what were you seeking? He was seeking to run businesses. Here we go. What is the status of U.S.-China relations today, and is enough being done to foster positive relations? So he's actually merged Nortel with Huawei, which is a Chinese company. He was welcomed into China with Nortel Telecom's equipment, wireless systems, and Metro optical systems. So overall, it was his experience with that merger that took him into being convinced that the partnership between China and the United States is the most important geopolitical benefit for our children. He started looking for anything he could do to make that partnership happen. He was offered the chance to go to China to head AEA Holdings, and he loved that idea. So then he moved to King Kong as a full-time chairman and CEO, where he could do some interesting things for AEA and start to engage the U.S. and China. 7 years ago, he established the Sanya Initiative to bring together a group of JCS-level retired generals with a similar group from China. This is a relationship that has changed his own and his U.S. colleagues' minds about Chinese intentions and where they're going. Likewise, it has changed those generals' views about where the Americans are going. The Sanya Initiative has resulted in similar philanthropy, which we've called the Summer Place Dialogue with Minister Liu He. Liu He is very close to President Xi Jinping on economic and central planning issues. He and I have for 4 years brought together a group of great economists along the lines of the Sanya model to talk about economic issues between America and China. This has convinced me that even old, set-in-their-ways military guys can end up forging strong relationships. In light of the new world reality, there's much to be done to support the U.S.-China relationship. Now, what he doesn't talk about is the tens of millions of dollars he has made while working on the Sanya Initiative, which is what was reported over at the Free Beacon for this interview. So, look, I'm not against people going to foreign countries and creating partnerships and making money. And I'm not against American businessmen getting information to the Chinese businessmen so that they can forge better relationships to do more business. But if the goal is to change our outlook towards China, and that's being done while an administration is in power, such as the Obama administration, where they really didn't care what kind of relationships we had business-wise with other countries. They just wanted to make sure America was subverted. So we are underneath the other countries. Remember, that was one of the primary goals of the Obama administration, was to reorient America's posture around the world so that we were no longer a dominant force, but a contributor. And he was able to do that. And so if you couple that with this Sanye initiative, which had it been done under the current administration, yeah, I said it, had it been done under the Trump administration, then Donald Trump would have said, well, my contribution to this is to make sure that whatever deals we're making, whatever business opportunities that Norton or whoever it is, AEA, whatever these companies are doing with Chinese companies, that there's no coercion involved, that it's just straight up business, 0 for 0 on the tariffs, 1 for 1 on whatever partnerships you're creating, that it's just equal footing business. You give, I give. If I give this on this end, you give that on your end, like, business. But under the Obama administration, it would just be, oh, well, we need to have a good relationship with them because we've been bad actors in the past. And that was how Barack Obama handled these types of things. And so I know there's invariably going to be someone who's like, oh, I don't care about this. You know what? You should care. This is the reason why our trade relationship with China has been so bad in the past, and why it is so hard for President Trump to make changes in that area. The reason he can't just make the change is because the Chinese government, it's not like Donald Trump is making these decisions in a vacuum where it's just him and a few aides and they're having these conversations and that's it. Donald Trump is actually spending time receiving feedback from people who are in our government who should be on our side, but have been co-opted by these Chinese people, by these Chinese businessmen. It's not an accident that you're just this Leaders Initiative, Leaders Online, and they interviewed him. You've got this former, like he's the number 2 in power in our military when he was the head of the Joint Chiefs. And he gets together this group of JCS level retired generals. So it's basically all of the guys who've had the same job he's had. And they're all sitting around talking. Can you imagine the knowledge base in a room like that? All of those JCS level generals sitting around, and they don't have anything to lose. In fact, they have much to gain by the relationships, by traveling to China, by receiving these Chinese generals and their staff into their homes or their country clubs or what have you. They have much to gain from that because there's a lot of money exchanging hands. People like that only sit down a certain number of times before they're expecting some kind of a deal to be made. They don't waste their time. You don't get to that level by being a time waster, a procrastinator, someone who can't be trusted to follow through. So when they get together in a space, big things are happening. He talked about mergers of companies that he oversaw. This is all happening within that power dynamic. And the Chinese are interfacing because it benefits them. They're not going to be there in that room, in that space, taking these meetings with these generals unless it is benefiting them. Chinese generals are not going to sit around with a bunch of Americans who are retired and just talk sports or just play golf. As fantastic as America's golf courses are, those generals are not coming here just to get some recreation. They can come here and get recreation on their own money. They can come here. Anyone can come to America and play golf. So this is an amazing revelation that should be on every single news outlet. It's not really a revelation if you think about it, because this interview that he did talking about all what he did, this is not new. Let me click on it, see if the date, 2014. April of 2014 is when this article came out. I was only prompted to look for it because of the article at the award-winning Washington Free Beacon, which is the interview with Gertz on Tucker Carlson. But again, let's all just talk about how Donald Trump is a traitor or something, because that's way more important than the real deal, which is what I just gave you there. Donald Trump being a traitor, that's like a couple of jelly beans. This is the steak dinner. All right, when we get back, we have more for you. Stay there.
What does it take to live an uncommon life? Here's former Super Bowl winning coach Tony Dungy with today's uncommon moment.
How often have you seen a team jump out to a big lead and then change their offense or defense, or just relax a little bit thinking that the game is already won? You'd think they would continue to play the same tough defense that had been successful, persevering until they won. But they don't, and they lose. There's always something left to be done right until the very end. The race of faithfulness is different for each person. Your job is to remain faithful and run it until the end, keeping the prize in your sights. The prize for finishing the race and remaining faithful is the crown of righteousness that He will give us when He returns.
New York Times best-selling author Tony Dungy. Discover more at CoachDungy.com. That's CoachDungy.com.
Abraham Hamilton III.
God put us in this world at this time to be salt and light. We don't fool because of the darkness that we're facing. This is not the first time in the world's history that it's gotten dark. God has called you and I to be His ambassadors, even in this dark moment.
Tune in to the Hamilton Quarter, weekdays at 5 p.m. Central on Urban Family Talk.
My name's Antonio. My drinking had gotten to the point where I was embarrassed to go to the liquor store. But when I came to Teen Challenge, I finally broke the stronghold alcohol had on my life. Now I'm truly free.
If you know an adult or teenager who's struggling with a chemical addiction, Teen Challenge can help. Call us today at 417-581-2181 or reach us online at teenchallengeusa.com. This is Urban Family Talk.
Securing America.
After U.S. Senator James Inhofe toured Border Patrol and ICE facilities in Texas, he spoke with Fox News about a new immigration bill he's introducing, which would require asylum seekers hoping to cross the border at points of entry to instead make their way to a U.S. consulate or embassy in Mexico or Canada for a credible fear screening.
My goal is to have an asylum system set up so that individuals don't have to come into the United States in order to have the determination. And that's where you hear the stories about setting up court dates between asylum justices and people just not showing up for court.
Chair of Northern Arizona University's Politics and International Affairs program, Stephen Nuno, says bills like this won't solve anything. From 2015 to 2016, there was an 11% decrease in the amount of applications granted.
In Los Fresnos, Texas, Charlie La Pastora, Fox News.
Welcome back to Stacy on the Right on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
Richard Goodstein is a lawyer. He advised both of Hillary Clinton's presidential campaigns, and he joins us tonight. Do you think, as Congressman Joe Kennedy of Massachusetts said, that it's inhumane, worse than inhumane, to arrest a man wanted for murder by the Mexican government?
Tucker, I hope we can agree, before I answer that question, because we're talking about ICE, that in deference to our president, we could use perfect English tonight.
I think Americans should use perfect. Well, hold on. Americans should use perfect English. Why is that? Is that racist now to say you should speak English? English language is not a race. It's what holds our country together. It's okay.
Wildly racist for the president introducing a Hispanic.
Language is. This is so stupid.
Sorry.
Language is not a race.
Not stupid.
When our ancestors came to this country, they were taught in public schools to speak English because it binds the country together. A country that has no common race or religion. Language holds us together. There's nothing wrong with that. And the left, which seeks to divide us for political gain, pretends it's racist to say you should speak English. It's not.
Is it? I mean, I'm genuinely interested in the opinions of anyone who feels like it's racist to ask everyone to speak English. And I really want to just take a second to say that I enjoy English. I'm going to just go ahead and out myself. I actually enjoy English a lot. I grew up. One of my little things that I would sneak and do because I wasn't sure if I was allowed was my parents had a big, huge red Webster's dictionary. And sometimes we had this big wall unit thing. It's called a shrunk. And I grew up in Germany, and my parents bought one of those, one of their first furniture pieces that they bought. And the dictionary was in the lower right-hand section of cabinets in the shrunk. And, of course, it was unlocked. And so I would just go over. And sometimes if I woke up in the middle of the night and I couldn't sleep, I would take my flashlight and I would go into the living room because we lived in on base in base housing. So there weren't a lot of extra rooms at our house. So I would go there, I'd get down there with my flashlight, and I would go to like the S section, and I would go down all of the words in the S section and just read them, just to see what because I was always thinking there's going to be some word in here that tells me a secret. And that was the impression that I had, that the dictionary held secrets. There had to be a word in there that once you learned the definition of that word, you knew something that was like outside of what was a normal thing. I mean, thinking back, I'm like, why was I doing that? Why didn't I just like turn on the TV or something? But of course, I kind of know that why too. There was no TV in the middle of the night back then. In Germany, AFN signed off at like 1 a.m. And then after that, it was just those the little bars with the high-pitched whining sound. So anyway, I enjoy English. I enjoy the Queen's English, meaning the proper pronunciation and usage of English. And every now and again, I'll say, some word that's made up or something like that. But that's not an insult to the English. I believe, because when you talk to other people from foreign countries, when you talk to someone who's German or French, they'll say, oh, English, it's so hard to learn. And if you ask them, why is English so hard to learn? They'll say, well, you can learn English. You can learn how to speak English and have a fully functioning command of a good size vocabulary of English words. But because you Americans use so much, so a word spoken a certain way can mean something completely different. And you guys use a lot of sarcasm. Sarcasm is also an indicator of higher intelligence, which is kind of interesting. The more sarcastic a person is, usually they have a higher intellect. But, aside from that, if you're a foreigner and you say something and use the word with strictly its definition, but the word has evolved to mean something else, meaning it literally, the definition of it doesn't completely encompass all of the meanings, it can be a little hard to capture the essence of English or to understand what Americans are saying to you if they're speaking casually and they're not treating you as someone who doesn't speak the language. And I find that fascinating. The use of idioms in English is very difficult for foreigners to kind of get a hold to in addition to learning the language. And so there's something special about coming to America and wanting to be an American and not just taking part in our customs and enjoying our fantastic society, but the ultimate in being an American is when you speak English. Tucker Carlson is not exaggerating when he says that it is the thing that binds us together, because in some countries, like Islamic countries, the thing that binds them together is they all practice Islam. That they won't allow any Bibles within their country's borders. This was something that I found so fascinating when I was on temporary duty, TDY, to Saudi Arabia. So they said, look, you can bring your Bible, but let's say you're here and your mom wants to send you another Bible. You might as well tell her not to do that, because everything they mail to you while you're here, every package that comes into Saudi Arabia is opened and it is searched. So that, like, if you're in Germany and you mail me a Bible in the United States, the U.S. Postal Service does not open up the box and check to see, are there any Bibles in here? Are there any Qurans in here? In Saudi Arabia, the practice of Islam is exclusive, and you cannot be a citizen of their country and practice Christianity. You can't own a Bible. So if you're there in the country on command sponsorship, as I was, I could bring a Bible with me. But if my mom sent me a Bible in the mail, their censors would remove that Bible, close the package back up, and send the rest of whatever was in there. So it was like 3 boxes of cookies and a Bible. I'd get 3 boxes of cookies. I might eventually end up getting that Bible, but not until after they kind of basically researched, found out everything they could about the person who sent it and everything they could about me. Then when they realized I was there on a temporary tour of duty, they would maybe let the Bible get through. But more often it just gets destroyed. This is what people don't really understand about this. So in those countries, they don't have necessarily a national language. They mostly all speak Farsi or they all speak one form of Arabic language. But they don't need a national language because they have a national religion that they all adhere to. In America, we don't have a national religion. We have Christianity, which is the founding, that's what this country was founded on. But you can easily move here and bring all the Qurans you want with you and even convert other people to Islam. That's the nature of the freedom of this country. But we do have English. And the speaking of English is facilitated by reading the Bible, or at least it was up until teachers got tired of teaching the Bible and they wanted to teach something else. And so they started making curriculum around teaching the language by reading all kinds of books, including the Bible, they said at first. And then afterwards, they're like, well, the Bible's kind of offensive to some people. It wasn't offensive. It was just they didn't want to teach it anymore. And so over time, now it's gotten to the point where if you're at school and you break a Bible out, somebody's liable to take it from you and say, you can't have that here, separation of church and state. It's a book that you can read in public. You can also read it in school. It is unconstitutional to force children to put their Bibles away or not read their Bibles in school. But do you see how we've traveled? Just think about it. Harvard University was a Christian university. Now, look at it. Same with Princeton. Because the atheists weren't starting hospitals and higher educational facilities, but the Christians were. That's how we got mass education in this country. Christians. So when he says, you know, this person isn't going to speak perfect English, it should be that every person who comes here, whether they are an immigrant or whether they are a natural-born citizen, that one of their chief aims should be to dominate the speaking of English. The side benefit to speaking English well is that it indicates that you are well educated, and it means that you are ultimately hireable. When you show up to an interview and you're speaking the Queen's English, a number of things are being communicated to the interviewer right in that moment. People who speak English very well are much less likely to be involved in crime. People who speak the Queen's English also, it means they can read it. And in the end, it means you are a great representative for the company, because when someone talks to you, whether you're at the front desk or the front counter, or you're answering phones, or if you're someone that you have to get through a few people to finally sit down with you to talk, whoever is interfacing with that business is going to interface with you and hear you speaking the King's English and think, the Queen's English, and think, oh my goodness, this person, it's just, there's all of the barriers are just, they've come down when the person you're speaking with speaks good English. The fact that you have to explain that nowadays just shows how far down the rabbit hole we've gone in basically accommodating liberals. It's just not right to expect everyone to speak English. Well, what do you expect them to speak? Pig Latin? Like, unless you're saying people come here so they don't speak English so they can be on welfare and just speak their own language, then why are they here? If you only want to speak Espanol, why not stay in a country that only speaks Espanol? Because there's free money to get here? Oh, okay. But if you say that gets, well, you're just being racist. That's not racist. That's the motivation for a person to come here and never want to learn to speak English. Like that story about the lady who was pregnant. She's on the way to the hospital to have a planned C-section. They stop at the gas station and her husband gets arrested. The news story was about how that he was arrested and deported because America is so horrible and Donald Trump is just arresting people for willy-nilly. But the fact is the guy was a murderer. He was wanted for murder in Mexico. That's why he was deported, because we have an extradition treaty with them. There was a warrant out for his arrest and he was being searched for. Meanwhile, the woman who's been in this country for over 10 years, she couldn't speak any English in the interview. She's been here for 10 years, living off the taxpayers, cranking out the babies who apparently neither the dad nor the mom are American citizens, but somehow the kids are. Miss me with that. Descended from slaves on one side, which means I don't agree with that. Birthright citizenship should apply only to people who are descended from slaves, because that is why that amendment was passed, to ensure that people who were slaves in this country previously could remain in this country after slavery. That's it. All the rest of it is just noise. And like I've said before, I'll say it again, blacks in this country, blacks who are descended from slaves, and whites in this country, people who they trace their lineage back to before the Civil War, we're one blood. Most black people have up to 40% of their makeup is other. So it's black and other, up to 40% for most blacks who are here since slavery. So that means some of that other is some of you. if we are one blood, if we're basically, we're related, and we share the common history of once having practiced slavery in this country and now not having practiced it because blacks and whites died in the Civil War to end it. So this idea that other foreigners can come here and claim the civil rights legacy, no, they can't. They don't share the blood that we share. The fact that blacks and whites in this country, some, are at each other's throats over, I don't even know what all of these issues are when the reality is we are one blood, is utterly ridiculous. And it is a pure function of dissension that's been sowed into our nation by liberals who just want to win elections at any cost. Destroying our shared heritage is it's a side casualty of this movement that they've implemented. And I understand that there are good people, some of them Christians, who they believe in the Black Lives Matter movement and other movements like that. But those movements are being used as tools to destroy our shared common bond, which is, it comes from our history as a country, from the Civil War that we fought, from the Reconstruction era, from the Jim Crow South, the Civil Rights era, and up to now. And just like any family you come across, because all families are dysfunctional to some degree, the relationship between blacks and whites in America is dysfunctional as well, but it is also a family relationship. And it's one that outsiders have no place trying to carve a piece of it out for themselves. And so I'm not, if you're immigrated here recently, welcome. Good to be here, but start speaking some English. Respect that history between the founders up to now that brought us to a place where you could come and live here and be amongst us. Respect that. Offer to us your contribution by speaking English. It's the right thing to do. And it is not the right thing to do to come here and sow dissension and to act as if you have something to do with our history here as a nation, about the civil rights movement, about slavery, about all of that. That you don't have any part of that. Learn about it, teach your kids about it, be glad that it happened and that you're here afterwards, but you don't have any parts of that. The LGBT movement doesn't have any part of it. Illegal immigrants don't have any part of it. Transgenders don't have any part of it. That is our unique shared bond as black and white Americans that we have come through, and we are at this point. And I'm just so sick of the discussion around it. It is so outrageous that we allow this to happen. Look, in the end, it doesn't matter even beyond our shared history, because this is the body I get to stroll around in while I'm on this earth. But I am an eternal being, as you are, called into the kingdom by Jesus Christ. Bondservant to Christ. That is my identity. I happen to sport the permanent tan. But that's it. And that's a legacy I'm glad to claim. All right, that's the show for today. We'll be back on Hump Day. Have a great night.
The views and opinions